Okay, so I realize this is a little bit of a convoluted answer, but we have to be honest with one another here. Caffeine is a performance-enhancing drug, but only when compared to the non-caffeinated state, and 90% of the adult population of the world is caffeinated. A typical cup of coffee, which by the way does not exist, depending on the vendor, depending on how much water to coffee ratio one uses, depending on whether or not it's French press or it's pour over, the type of coffee, et cetera, all of that is going to determine the total amount of caffeine in that coffee. But we can set some outer bounds on the total amount of caffeine that likely exists in a cup of coffee. And it's probably somewhere between 100 milligrams, that would be on the weaker side for a 6 or 8 ounce cup of coffee, out to about 300 milligrams for the equivalent 6 to 8 ounces of coffee. But if you were to brew your coffee very, very strong, or like me, occasionally throw a shot of espresso in there too, you could get that number up to 400 or 500 milligrams of caffeine. I personally tolerate caffeine pretty well. I've been drinking caffeine since I was a teenager, mostly in the form of brewed, unflavored yerba mate tea. It's important to stay away from the smoked varieties of yerba mate. If you're going to get your caffeine from yerba mate, the smoked varieties can be carcinogenic. The non-smoked varieties don't seem to have that property. But there's a lot of caffeine in yerba mate, so I'll drink yerba mate and have for many, many years. Or I'll drink black coffee or espresso Americano, things of that sort. That's my preferred source of caffeine. Most people are drinking coffee to get their caffeine. And I would say that if you are going to drink your caffeine, drink it in the early part of the day. As I mentioned earlier, I am a big proponent of delaying your first caffeine intake until at least 90 minutes after waking in order to avoid the afternoon crash. I've talked a lot about this on the podcast. There are a lot of clips on the internet explaining the rationale behind that. And if you do experience an afternoon crash in energy, I do recommend delaying your morning caffeine intake to 90 to 120 minutes after waking. Now, for people that want to get more of a true cognitive enhancing and performance enhancing effect from caffeine, again, you're going to have to abstain from caffeine for about 4 days. For regular caffeine drinkers, that's going to be difficult, right? That is going to lead to headaches. That's going to lead to brain fog. That's going to lead to feelings of malaise. In fact, the last time I took 4 days off or even a week off from caffeine consumption was when I was sick. I don't get sick very often, but when I am sick, I generally abstain from caffeine. And sometimes I wonder whether or not the malaise I feel from whatever, viral or bacterial thing I might be dealing with when I'm sick is in part the malaise of caffeine withdrawal. I certainly notice I feel much better when I return to drinking caffeine, but